Tampa Bay Lightning versus Florida Panthers. This in-state matchup already feels like a reunion with unresolved business. You have the two-time defending champs at home, Swagger slowly returning after a wobbly start, staring down the team they have bounced out of the playoffs in back-to-back first rounds. Florida rolls into this one at 20-14-2. Tampa sits at 20-13-3, so this is not some paper mismatch. It is more like two neighbors arguing over who actually owns the driveway. The catch is that those records hide very different current vibes, because Florida has caught fire at 8-2-0 over its last 10, while Tampa has stumbled along at 4-5-1, even if a nice little three-game spurt before the break made things feel less gloomy. Let me explain why that context matters so much. The Panthers have basically been living in crisis mode since camp, with their captain Alexander Barkov shelved long-term after ACL and MCL surgery, and Matthew Tkachuk still yet to play this season as he works back from adductor and hernia surgery, and yet they are playing some of their sharpest hockey of the year. Most teams lose that kind of star power and spend 3 months just feeling sorry for themselves, but Florida has leaned into what it already did well, rolling waves of forwards, defending in 5-man groups, and trusting that whoever is in the lineup knows the system. That is why their recent surge is so annoying for opponents, because you are not just chasing one hot line, you are getting 40 to 60 minutes of a structure that survived a brutal injury list and is now starting to hum again. And front and center in that, you have Brad Marchand sliding into the role of emotional spark plug and primary scorer like he has been there for a decade. He leads the team in goals and points, not as some cute veteran side story, but as the engine of the offense, and his game fits the Panthers perfectly, nasty enough on the forecheck to set a tone and skilled enough to finish when the puck pops loose in those chaotic netmouth scrums this rivalry always produces. Add in the familiar supporting faces, from the middle six centers who handle the dirty defensive zone work to the blue line that loves to jump in as a second wave, and you end up with a group that looks far more comfortable in one-goal, playoff-style games than their injury chart suggests they should. Now flip the camera to Tampa and the story is almost the opposite. On paper, you still see the star power in the top six and the name recognition in goal, but the price they are paying for that firepower is written all over the blue line, with Victor Hedman on injured reserve with an elbow procedure, Eric Cernak on long-term injured reserve, Emil Lilleberg also shelved, and Brandon Hagel now sitting on injured reserve up front. That is a lot of size, snarl, and first-pass reliability stripped out of a defense that already carried heavy minutes, and although Ryan McDonough is back to soak up some of that load, there is only so much patching you can do when the schedule starts asking questions every other night. Honestly, you could see the adjustment happening over that 4-game homestand before the break. The Lightning finished at 2-2-0, including a convincing 4-1 win over St. Louis, which is nice, but it is also telling that they needed Andrei Vasilevsky at close to full form and their power play cooking to make those wins look comfortable. In other words, they are leaning more on special teams and goaltending while the 5-on-5 machine tries to remember what it looks like without Hedman dictating everything from the back. Here is the thing that really tips the scales mentally. Florida went into Tampa less than 2 weeks ago and walked out with a 5-2 win, driving play at even strength and reminding everyone that this matchup has been pretty one-sided lately when the games truly matter. The Panthers have taken control of this rivalry, winning the last 2 playoff series and plenty of regular season meetings along the way, and you can feel that in how relaxed they look in third periods against this particular opponent. They know that if they keep throwing pucks in behind the Tampa defense and finishing checks, those patched-up pairings will eventually crack. Now layer in the setting. Florida is 12-7-2 at home, and they are not padding that at the expense of weak travel teams. They are hammering fellow contenders in this building, from comeback wins against Carolina to high-scoring punch-ups with Western powers. Tampa has been terrific on the road at 10-4-3, but a lot of that success has come when their blue line was healthier, and they were the ones dictating terms, not hanging on as the other team spends whole shifts cycling down low. The odds makers are practically shrugging at this one, hanging a very short number that treats it like a coin flip on neutral ice with a small nudge toward the home side, and that is where the value argument really shows up. If you give the rested 2-time champions a loud home crowd, a hot run of form, and a structurally wounded opponent whose best defenders will be watching in street clothes, it is hard not to lean toward the team that has already proved this exact matchup works in its favor both in last spring's playoffs and again earlier this month. As our first pick for this matchup, the Panthers money line is our full game side pick. Most books are hanging a total in that 5 to 5.5 goal neighborhood, sometimes nudging it up to 6, which looks a little modest when you remember that Tampa is scoring around 3.25 goals per game and Florida sits just a tick under that, while the combined goals against per game for these teams is closer to 6 than 5. What jumps out is how Florida has been winning lately. They just put 5 unanswered on Carolina in 1/3 period. They played in a 7-6 track meet against Columbus earlier in the month, and even their losses tend to tilt into goalie pulled with 3 minutes left chaos instead of sleepy 2-1 rock fights. That is the style of a team that trusts its ability to score in bunches more than it trusts a rope-a-dope. And it makes sense when you realize how much offensive weight now runs through Marchand, Reinhart, Bennett, and the attacking defensemen who love to join the rush. Tampa, funny enough, has drifted into that same kind of high-event profile, just from a different direction. Their offense has not really been the issue. They have the firepower to hang crooked numbers, and with Vasilevsky rounding back into form, the coaching staff seems comfortable trading chances as long as their power play and top line can tilt the ice enough over 60 minutes. The problem, or blessing if you are holding a ticket on a higher total, is that a blue line missing Hedman, Cernak, and Lilleberg will naturally give up more clean looks, and no amount of structure can fully hide that against a forechecking group like Florida's. Here is where the betting trends line up neatly with the eye test. Florida and its opponents have gone over 5.5 goals in 20 of 36 games, Tampa in 18 of 36, and together they combine for about 6.4 goals scored per night while allowing close to 5.8, which is exactly the profile you look for when the posted total is sitting underneath that average. That is not a guarantee of anything, of course, but it tells you that normal nights for these clubs are already living in a scoring band where one weird bounce or empty net is enough to push things over. This rivalry also has a way of pouring gasoline on any small spark. You have playoff history, recent bad blood, and a very real chance that special teams get plenty of reps with both benches more than willing to finish checks a little too hard. Every extra power play is 2 minutes of set plays for elite shooters, and both coaching staffs know where the soft seams are in the other team's penalty kill from seeing each other so often. From a game flow angle, it feels much more likely that we get stretches where the tempo spikes than some careful, conservative chess match. Tampa still loves the long stretch pass that can turn a harmless breakout into a 2-on-1 in 3 seconds, and Florida's aggressive pinches on home ice mean that if those plays go wrong, the puck is going right back the other way with numbers. You can picture the script, a tight first period while everyone finds their legs after the break, then one messy goal in the second that opens the game up and forces the trailing side to take more risks, which is when both of these offenses are at their most dangerous. Even the goaltending angle quietly leans toward a game with enough scoring. Sergei Bobrovsky has the resume and the ring collection to throw a shutout at anyone, and Vasilevsky is cut from the same cloth. But the reality this season is that both teams have been perfectly comfortable playing in 4-3 type wins rather than insisting on 2-1 masterpieces. When coaches stop chasing perfection and start accepting good enough defense in exchange for more offensive zone time, the math on a modest total gets pretty interesting. Put it all together, recent scoring form, injury-shaped defenses, rivalry energy, and a total that sits a bit below the combined offensive profile of these two clubs, and you get a game script where a 3-2 finish actually feels like the low end of the realistic range rather than the median. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Detroit Red Wings versus Carolina Hurricanes. This matchup feels like one of those games the schedule makers circled months ago. You have Detroit rolling in on a heater, sitting at 22-13-3 and feeling like they can trade punches with anybody, and you have Carolina at 22-11-3 on home ice, still carrying that quiet swagger of a team that expects to control the game more often than not. It is not just about records, though. Carolina's whole identity is built around that constant tilt of the ice, that live in your end, not ours mentality, where shifts blur together because they keep sending fresh legs over the boards to hound the puck again and again. If you watch them for a full game, you notice something simple but important. They do not have to be pretty to be effective. They just keep stacking small territorial wins, a clean exit here, a forced dump in there, a long change that quietly wears down your second pair. Over 60 minutes, that style feels a lot like being pushed up a hill in slow motion. Honestly, that is not the kind of environment visiting teams love to deal with, especially when the home side gets last change and can steer matchups toward Detroit's more offense-first looks. Detroit, on the other hand, has that fun, slightly chaotic energy right now. They are winning, they are scoring, and they are riding that why not us December confidence. But when you look a little closer, the picture is not quite as clean as the standings suggest. The overall goal differential sits closer to neutral than you would expect for a team at the top of its division, which quietly hints that a few of those wins have been more knife-edge than highlight reel. It is a bit like driving a fast car with slightly worn tires, thrilling, very fun, but you would rather not test the grip on a tight, defensive road game. Carolina also comes into this one with a bruise or two to the ego after that recent collapse against Florida, where a strong start turned into a rough third period. Games like that tend to stick in a veteran locker room. You can almost hear the coaches and leaders using this spot as a chance to reset the standard at home, especially against another Eastern contender. Even with several regulars on the shelf or listed on injured reserve, including key pieces up front and on the blue line, this roster still has enough depth that the structure does not fall apart. If anything, it nudges them even more toward that everyone buys in, everyone works template that has made them such a tough out for years. Then there is the history between these two. Recent seasons have not been especially kind to Detroit when they visit Carolina's barn, and those patterns do not decide tonight. But they do tell you something about how these styles mesh. Carolina's heavy on possession approach has consistently dragged these meetings toward the kind of game script they prefer, and that has usually meant the home side dictating pace and territory. For a road team riding high, walking into that environment can feel like being told to play someone else's system for 3 periods. And if you are looking at this purely from a who covers angle, that combination of process, home ice, matchup control, and a motivated favorite coming off a stinging loss points pretty clearly in one direction, even if the scoreboard has not started yet. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. The market has this number sitting in that classic cautious zone around the mid-5s to 6, which is usually the book's polite way of saying, we respect the defensive structure and the goaltenders here. On the surface, that makes sense. You have two teams that understand systems, both with coaching staffs that can and will clamp down if things get too loose. But hockey is rarely that polite, especially when you put two confident Eastern teams on the ice right after the holiday break. When you think about how these two actually play, you get a different feel. Carolina does not just shoot a lot for the fun of it, they treat volume like a lever they can pull on the game. More pucks to the net means more rebounds, more broken plays, more scramble shifts, which, funny enough, is where a lot of modern scoring comes from. Detroit, for their part, has leaned into a more adventurous style this season, trusting that their skill can cash in even if the defensive numbers are not always picture perfect. That we can score our way out of trouble personality might not make every coach sleep well, but from a total perspective, it is music. Special teams add another wrinkle. Neither penalty kill is so dominant that you expect it to suck the air out of the game, and both power plays sit in that respectable enough to hurt you bad. In practical terms, that means every whistle has the potential to tilt the total, especially if the refs decide to set a tight standard early. 1 or 2 marginal calls can snowball into 3 or 4 power plays each, and suddenly you are not talking about a careful, low-event chess match anymore. You are talking about a game where timing and execution on the man advantage decide whether the scoring pace spikes. There is also the mental side of it. Carolina has had a nasty recent habit of letting comfortable situations get a little too interesting in third periods, and that kind of trend can create wild scorelines, both for and against. Detroit, coming in hot and confident, is not the type of team to quietly go away if they fall behind by a couple. They have already shown they are comfortable trading chances when needed, and that willingness to stretch the ice can turn a tight-looking projection into one of those nights where you look up and realize you are sitting on 6 or 7 goals before you even get to empty net time. The funny thing is, the historical meeting pattern between these two has leaned more toward tighter, lower-scoring results, which is probably a big reason the total is not sitting higher. But that older script belonged to a slightly different Red Wings team, one that was not quite as explosive, and a slightly healthier Hurricanes blue line. Now you have a Detroit group that has found extra scoring punch, plus a Carolina side that is missing some key defensive pieces and has been leaning on pressure and pace to get through it. Put all of that together, and it is not hard to imagine a game that starts measured, then gradually opens up as both teams push to make a statement and the talent on the ice takes over. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Edmonton Oilers versus Calgary Flames. The Battle of Alberta is back on the menu, and it shows up right after the holidays like that one relative who always turns family dinner into a story. Oilers at Flames on December 27th, Scotiabank Saddledome, rivalry energy already built in before the puck even drops. Edmonton walks into this one with that very specific kind of swagger you only get after a 5-1 beatdown in the first leg of a home-and-home. They have put together a December run that actually feels sustainable, not just a heater. Wins stacking up, that record sitting at 19-13-6, and they are part of that three-team traffic jam at the top of the Pacific with 44 points. That matters for two reasons. First, they are not just playing well, they are fighting for real position. Second, they are doing it with a scoring profile that completely fits how this matchup tends to tilt. Their offense is sitting north of 3.4 goals per game, and the power play is basically a cheat code, hitting at roughly 34%. 1 out of every 3 chances is turning into a goal. That is not just good. That is, you take a bad penalty and the building gets quiet in a hurry good. And when you look at what just happened a few nights ago, it was not a fluke story of weird bounces. It was Edmonton tilting the ice, living on the man advantage, and making Calgary chase the game. That is the kind of pattern that tends to repeat more often than people like to admit, especially when the underlying pieces have not changed much. On the other side, Calgary is not rolling over. They come in at 15-18-4, which sounds messy, but their recent stretch is more respectable. 3 wins in their last 5. At home, they still have that stubborn, hard-to-shake identity. Forecheck, compete, drag you into the corners and see who blinks first. The crowd in that building hates Edmonton with a kind of joy that should probably be studied. Honestly, if you are writing a script for chaos, this rink is a pretty good set. But here is the thing, that Flames blue line is not at full strength. Jake Bean is sidelined indefinitely after surgery, so one of their puck movers is simply off the board. Zane Parekh, the young defender everyone is circling as a future pillar, is not available to help them in this spot either. So Calgary is leaning harder on the rest of that group against a team that can punish even small gaps in structure. You know how it feels in beer league when the other team has that one line you do not want to see coming over the boards again. This is that, just with better lighting and a national TV truck outside. Edmonton has a wrinkle of its own in net. They went out and brought in Tristan Jarry to stabilize the crease, and then he hit injured reserve after only a handful of starts. So the job falls back to the remaining tandem, including Connor Ingram and the familiar depth behind him. On paper, that looks like a reason to hesitate. In practice, in front of an offense that dangerous, it often turns into just be league average and we will do the rest. Recent results support that idea. In their last 5, Edmonton has score lines of 5-1, 4-3, 2-5, 3-1, and 6-4. Even with that loss to Minnesota mixed in, the pattern is pretty clear. They score, and more often than not, they control enough of the game to let their talent dictate how it ends. Now connect that to the number hanging on the board. The Oilers are a road favorite around -130 on the money line, and the puck line sits at the usual 1.5. So you are basically being asked a simple question with a not-so-simple emotional weight. Do you trust this Edmonton team, with this current form, to go back into the same matchup they just dominated and win by margin again in a hostile building? Everything from the recent head-to-head record, 8 wins, 3 losses, and 1 overtime loss in their last 12 against Calgary, to the special teams gap says that they are more likely to dictate the terms again. Calgary can absolutely keep it honest if they drag this into a grinding 5-on-5 battle. But the more whistles there are, the more this feels like it tilts toward the team that is already feasting on the power play and skating with confidence. As our first pick for this matchup, the Edmonton Oilers money line is our full game side pick. Odds makers are hanging a 6.5 as the projected total, which is basically the market saying, we are expecting real offense here, but you have to decide how crazy it gets. And honestly, this matchup has all the ingredients for goals. Start with Edmonton again. They are averaging around 3.4 goals per game, and they are not exactly locking things down on the other side either, with 128 goals allowed through 38 games. Their last 5 contests had combined totals of 6, 7, 7, 4, and 10. So in 4 of those 5 outings, the game reached at least 6 total goals, and in 3 of them it hopped clean over that 6.5 line. That is not a random blip. It is a pattern of open games where their offensive power, plus a defense that can trade chances, pushes scoring higher. Calgary's recent game flow points in the same direction. Look at their last handful of results. They have scorelines like 6-3, 4-2, 3-6, and 1-5 on the board. 4 of their last 5 have hit 6 or more total goals, and betting trends back that up. with the total going over in 4 of those 5. At home, the long-term picture is similar, with a big chunk of their recent games in this building ending up on the higher side of the number. It is like the Saddle Dome has quietly become a place where structure shows up for warm-ups and then gets forgotten as soon as the puck drops. Now fold in the matchup context. We just saw these teams combine for 6 goals in the first leg, with Edmonton filling the net and Calgary barely getting on the board. A blowout like that can sometimes scare people off the over because they picture the losing coach barking about defense first for 3 days. But there is another side to it. When a team gets embarrassed like that in a rivalry game, they usually come out in the rematch pressing harder, taking more risks, pushing the pace. More pinches, more stretch passes, more aggressive entries. All of that is great for scoring, even when the intent is to tighten up. The personnel situation also nudges this toward a game with chances. Calgary is managing without Jake Bean and without Zane Parrick available on the back end, which means more minutes spread over the remaining defenders. Fatigue, mismatches, and the odd missed assignment tend to creep in over 60 minutes. For Edmonton, the absence of Tristan Jarry keeps their goaltending picture a little less settled than they probably wanted. Backup-driven games can absolutely stay under the total, but more often, when both offense and power play are this potent, it increases the odds of 1 or 2 extra goals sneaking in. Put all of that together and you get a pretty clear game script. 2 teams familiar with each other, one coming off a 5-goal outburst, the other trying to answer at home, with special teams and recent trends both leaning toward higher totals. You can absolutely imagine a world where one goalie stands on his head and ruins all of this. But if you are going to plant a flag on how this game is most likely to feel on the scoreboard, it leans toward a pace where 7 or more goals is not some wild outlier, just a natural extension of how these teams are playing right now. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Colorado Avalanche versus Vegas Golden Knights. Colorado walks into Vegas looking like the final boss in a video game. That team with the glowing health bar that just refuses to shrink, sitting at a ridiculous 27-2-7 and chewing through the league while everyone else is still sorting themselves out. They already came into this same building on Halloween and handled their business with a clean 4-2 win, so there is no mystery about whether their style travels. Honestly, the story the numbers tell is simple. They score a ton, they give up very little, and they have that annoying habit of turning even close games into how did this end up multi-goal wins late. Here is the thing, though, that sort of profile does not just make them scary, it makes them the darling of every casual bettor scrolling the board. When the absolute wagon shows up in Vegas as the road favorite, looking for a 7th straight win, the price tends to drift to a spot where you are not really betting on the better team anymore. You are betting on whether they blow the doors off again. Meanwhile, on the other side of the marquee, Vegas is sitting there with a 17-8-10 record, quietly leading their division, and somehow their reputation right now is more something is off than this is still a serious problem in the West. Look a little closer, and you see all those overtime and shootout losses piled up, which basically scream that this group lives in one-goal stress every other night rather than getting flattened. Add in the context that matters. Vegas is not even close to full strength, missing big pieces on the blue line and still dealing with question marks around some of their top names. Yet they just put 7 on San Jose in one furious burst and pushed Edmonton hard in a 1-goal loss where their secondary scoring and new faces showed up. That is not the profile of a team that folds at home the moment a juggernaut walks in. You also get the stuff the models do not really capture. First game after the holiday break, a loud Vegas crowd, a home team that has heard for days how unstoppable Colorado is, and a coaching staff that knows their best path is dragging the Avs into another 1-goal grinder rather than opening the ice. So instead of asking Vegas to slay the dragon outright, you are simply asking a tough, prideful group in their own barn to avoid getting run out of it, and that is something their record and style say they are built to do. As our first pick for this matchup, the Vegas Golden Knights money line is our full game side pick. Colorado alone is playing the kind of hockey where 4 goals in a night feels normal, not special, and Vegas is not that far behind once you factor in what their games actually look like lately. Even if you hate math, you can feel it when you watch them. The Avalanche do not really believe in quiet evenings. They push the pace, they live in the offensive zone, and their shot volume turns what starts as a tight game into chaos in a hurry. On the other side, this version of Vegas has turned into a team that is perfectly willing to trade chances. That 7-2 thumping of San Jose, the wild comeback push that came up just short against Edmonton, those are not the results of a team trying to win 2-1 with zero risk. Part of that is by necessity. Key defenders are missing, the goaltending situation has had to bend a bit, and when the blue line is patched together, you get more scrambly shifts, more broken plays, and more high danger looks both ways. That might make coaches reach for the antacids, but for a total, it is beautiful chaos. Let me explain why this sets up as a fun, scoring environment rather than a sleepy chess match. Colorado's attack does not really throttle down just because they are on the road, and when they see a defense that is not fully intact, they lean into their strength, long offensive shifts, cross-ice puck movement, and waves of pressure. Vegas, when they are chasing or protecting a narrow margin, tends to open up too, whether they like it or not, and that has shown up in those recent box scores that look more like pinball than a sleepy regular season grind. Special teams only add fuel with an Avalanche power play that lives on sheer volume of dangerous looks and a Vegas unit that can punish a sloppy whistle-filled game in a hurry. First game back after the break, timing a little off, penalties slightly more frequent, and tired legs in the third period usually mean odd man rushes instead of clean, tidy breakouts. So when you put a high-octane road offense together with a banged-up but dangerous home team that has been living inside 6 and 7 goal game scripts, it is hard not to lean toward more goal horns than fewer in this spot. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.